Hi, I'm Georgie Dickens, host of Stratospheric Leaders, the podcast where I get to have inspired conversations with extraordinary leaders from across capital markets. Join me to hear their game-changing strategies, the personal stories and powerful sound bites behind their stratospheric success. Every episode packed with wisdom, insight and real-world lessons, the stuff they simply don't teach you in business school. If you want to elevate your game and most importantly, those around you, this podcast is for you. Enjoy. Andy, I am delighted to welcome you to an episode of Stratospheric Leaders. And for the listeners, Andy Kuper is the founder and CEO of LeapFrog Investments, the pioneering impact investment firm that has reached over 500 million low-income people worldwide with access to essential healthcare, financial tools, and climate solutions. Under his leadership, LeapFrog has raised over $3 billion from global investors. And Andy, you're recognised by Fortune as one of the top companies changing the world. And what I love in the time that we've spent together is you are such a visionary leader and you show that purpose and profit can scale together, transforming industries whilst delivering both impact and extraordinary returns. I am super excited to have this conversation. So thank you for joining me.
Well, it's great to be here, and you're very kind. My worry is I can only disappoint after that introduction, but thanks, Georgie.
Can I say there is no chances of that? Now, before we dive in, because I want to hear about the genesis of LeapFrog, I would love the audience to get to know you outside of your role. So one lesser known fact about yourself. If we were to Google search you, what wouldn't we find out?
I'm a very over-involved father. I have somehow managed to run a global firm while being very closely connected to my children, and I'm a completely easy mark for them. If they ever want anything, they don't call mum, they call me. And while I may appear to have the capacity for independent judgment and to decide how hundreds of millions of dollars are deployed, in my children's case, I just say yes.
Okay, well, again, that's very similar in our household, actually. So I get it. I totally get it. So you are, well, not that children should have favourites, but clearly, as you said, they know where to come.
Exactly.
Well, look, I'd love to hear about LeapFrog's origin story. The genesis, where did it all begin?
So I'm South African by origin, and I think one of my most formative moments was that I went to the only unsegregated school under apartheid called Woodmead. And I was there on the Union Building lawns in Pretoria the day Nelson Mandela moved from prisoner to president. At his inauguration, there were about 50,000 of us standing on the lawns, almost everybody whom had been involved in the anti-apartheid struggle in some way or other, multiple races, backgrounds, histories. And there was a sudden boom just as he stepped up. And we all looked up and we thought, oh, this is the counter-revolution that's come. We're all in trouble. And everybody kind of hit the ground and looked up. And there were the jets of the Air Force trailing 6 colors of the new South African flag, saluting Nelson Mandela as president. And everybody got up and pointed up and said, those are our jets. And there was this profound moment where the world had been very badly structured in that country and more generally. And a dedicated group of people had changed that, had restructured things very fundamentally so that you had a different level of agency, a different level of control, and a different level of fairness in the world. And there was a moment there where you felt like you really could, with a dedicated group, change the world. And as I've gone through various iterations, and I've been in the nonprofit sector, I've been in the public policy space, I've been in academia, and then over many years in the business and investment space, I've had that sense that things can be very badly structured. Markets can be very badly structured. And often some of the greatest opportunities that exist are to transform those. And a dedicated group of people can really reshape the world such that you can have thoughts and you can do actions that you would have never thought imaginable. And really, the history of LeapFrog was based on that experience because I came to understand by helping develop many successful ventures and organizations that you could fundamentally look at the world and say capitalism is brilliant, but it's very badly structured. There are a lot of businesses that are not getting the capital they need. There are a lot of people that are not getting the goods and services they need to lift themselves securely into the middle class. And by the way, that was an emerging markets view, but it's a global view. It happens in the developed markets too. And surely there must be a way to ensure that these capital markets work better, that they get behind these businesses and that they serve these many, many billions of people better, so that that works for the economy, but also that those people are able to rise and achieve much better futures for their families and their societies. And that sense really stuck with me, and everything that I've done since then has been dedicated to that kind of transformative vision.
And I love what you said when you said a dedicated group of people reshaping the world. That really landed for me, because you look back through history, revolutions all start with a small band of revolutionaries, people who can see an unmet future, and people who've got the, I don't know whether it's courage and commitment and drive and passion and energy to really revolutionize, transform.
Yeah, absolutely. Our first value as LeapFrog is humble people with a world-changing ambition. And really, revolutions can go very wrong if the people get arrogant and self-involved, and they can become as destructive as the prior regime. So it's incredibly important that that group of people have a level of humility about how much they don't know, while not losing the immense ambition to change the world. And so much of my experience in countries like India or Kenya or Indonesia or Vietnam, where we invest, has been that you have to take an attitude of learning, and you have to go and spend time and listen to understand and engage local leaders and local people in a way that allows you then to bring capital, to bring expertise from elsewhere in a way that's helpful and that's successful. So many others arrive thinking they have money and all the answers and expect everybody to just jump, which of course they do in the short term. But over time, you only create sustainable success, and you only really are able to operate across multiple environments if you have that level of humility combined with the ambition to really make that change. And that is an antinomy. That is something that one really has to keep in your mind. But importantly, LeapFrog is founded on that idea of bringing things together that you might think would be kept apart. Our second value, for example, is excellent investors with an impact soul. So again, those are not two things that are automatically brought together. But of course, if you're going to be an excellent investor, you're going to generate more capital for areas of impact. You're going to have more money to put into these companies that change people's lives. And if you have an impact soul, you're not going to go and do destructive things in the society that result in regulators and politicians jumping on you and you having a bad time there as well. So again, this kind of antinomy, this kind of bringing together of opposites really works. And still on the back of every single LeapFrog business card, since I made the first one in a Kinko's in New York and went back to my office in a Starbucks, it says profit with purpose. Those magical words, profit with purpose, because really LeapFrog is dedicated to these synergies and ultimately to the idea that profit and purpose can be brought together, and that where you do purposeful things, you can generate stronger returns for your investors. And where you generate strong returns for investors, you can end up raising more capital and getting more capital intermediated to these businesses and peoples to change their lives.
Yeah, and listening to that, two truths can be true at the same time. They can coexist. You said there about an attitude of learning, and it really struck me that it's such a rare quality to truly listen to somebody. People say, yeah, I'm a great listener. I have lots of leaders who say they're great listeners, but actually to truly listen, to engage, to be curious, to ask the questions, to give people space to speak, to share their stories. And ultimately, what I heard you saying there is then you can bring them solutions in a way that's meaningful and valuable for them. Not what you think is valuable, but what they're telling you, that you can spot the gaps.
Absolutely. I was in Vietnam last week, meeting with a banking group that we invested behind called HD Bank, and talking to the chairman and the vice chairman, incredibly impressive human beings, but also to the staff and the customers. And it was talking to the staff and the customers that I came to understand where the value add really lay. Talking to a woman who had to previously, before she had the right technology and before she had the help of AI, go around a business park until 10:30 p.m. in the evening and not see her children because she was getting home so late, now able to get home by 6 and spend time with her kids. Well, that says a lot about the quality of jobs that LeapFrog and its companies are helping produce. But it also says something about efficiency in that institution. That bank is cutting hours and hours off the time that agents are taking to do things. And it's probably going to have a competitive advantage as a result. And that's something for us to really build on, to have a more efficient agency force and to be serving customers more swiftly and efficiently so that they have a better customer experience. So when I then am able to look at that bank and say, how do we help this bank? I'm able to say, wow, well, our customer experience team could really contribute in these and these ways, not just, oh, that's a nice bank, we want them to do better. And that's because we really listen, we pay attention and build our companies and our business process, our investment process from the customers backwards. Now, of course, there are over 500 million people that LeapFrog's companies reach. And so we have a large sample, and we come to understand if you're serving a woman who is using a smartphone, she has a very different way of interacting and a very different set of health needs than a man with a brick phone. If she's in Ghana versus in India, she might again have very different needs, or in a rural area, or in Mumbai, in a big city, very different needs. And so we've come to understand that you need to listen, you need to spend time understanding these human beings, but then not tell them what they ought to do, but try to serve their fundamental needs. One of the things I love about capitalism is that in the end, the customer is right. And in these cases, just because you're talking about millions of customers with very low ticket purchases, doesn't mean the customer isn't right. And so LeapFrog's reframe was, instead of saying, like a lot of people did, ooh, poverty, yuck, or look at those poor people, or I'm so great to be serving them, we said those are emerging consumers and producers. Those are people who are the masters of their own destiny, and we need to build everything to serve them. And that dedication and that sense of listening and responding to them has been at the heart of why I think we've been able to grow and do what we've done.
Yeah, and I listening to you there, at the heart, at the core, and I also hear you say, like, we don't make assumptions. We don't know what we don't know. And you said there, and can you repeat it again? Because you said, is it that you go backward, the customer backwards? So what was the phrase you used there? I think it was really...
We build our businesses and our investment process from the customer backwards. And so we try and understand them very deeply and their needs and their unmet needs. And then we try and think what products and services, what structure of distribution, what underlying process will work for them to have a positive customer experience. And then we try and support our companies to develop products and distribution and ways of engagement that really speak to the true needs of those customers. And then you find that your marketing costs drop dramatically because people have such a positive experience that they share that by word of mouth in their community. Yeah. You find that your brand magnetism, the stickiness of your customers, also increases. And you find that regulators get behind you because they know that you are a reliable partner to portfolio companies, and that ultimately you help those companies to look after the customers well and not to end up with explosions of problems here and there. So you end up having this incredible level of support from key constituencies, not just from the customers, if you actually have that ultimate focus.
And with that focus, we just mentioned a minute, it's listening to the customers, paying attention, getting feedback. And you mentioned it's not just, meeting people at C-suite level, that, when you're going into, it's staff, it's it's speaking to everybody to really get that all-round view. What's most surprised you? And by that I mean, what's an assumption you've made in the past about feedback you were expecting to hear from customers, but actually it was quite different to what you'd anticipated?
So LeapFrog's companies serve tens of millions of people, for example, with credit. And credit is the lifeblood of many businesses as you're building businesses. And I was in India meeting a garage owner. And I went in assuming that he had a certain set of needs based on his income level. This is the owner of a small business, and these are the things that are going to matter to him. And I assumed that everybody around him was in that same space. And as I spoke to him more and more, I learned that his parents, who were still living with them, had been people selling fruit on the side of the road in India, extremely, extremely poor people with one kind of experience, one set of needs. He was a garage owner, but he had also managed to save and support a business that sold textiles across town, and he was getting transport across town constantly. So he had different set of needs as an expanding business person. And it turned out his daughter had an MBA from MIT and was working at Amazon in Seattle. Now, when you look at what it is to provide credit, or for that matter, savings or insurance or any other product to that person's family, you shouldn't make assumptions because they are operating with such different needs across these geographies. And if I may say, the grandparents were in the 19th century, the parent is in the 20th century, and the grandchild is in the 21st century, and they have very different needs, very different products that work for them, and probably very different expectations of what your company needs to do to service them and provide these kinds of products and services. So one thing I really encourage people to do is to think about not just that customer, but the architecture around them, the relationships around them in their family, but also in their community. Often with savings, with credit, with these areas, a lot depends on the attitude of the people around you, in healthcare as well. And what you are and aren't prepared to do is determined by your community and by what is familiar or unfamiliar to your community. And that has a huge effect on how you market products and how you serve people.
Yes, so listen, ask questions, don't make assumptions. And I think listen and silent. Someone shared this with me a while ago. Listen and silent. Now, anagrams have got the same letters, and I was like, wow. So if we listen, we are actually being silent, and we are holding space. To get valuable data points that that feed into strategy, feed into that vision. And just to rewind a little bit, like LeapFrog, we talked about the genesis. I'm always interested in the names of companies because typically there's a story behind it. What is the story behind the name LeapFrog?
I have to tell you that the first award we won was from Private Equity International for the name. And at that point, I had $0. And so I was extremely excited to have an award to send around to potential investors. And I waited at this point for the magazine to arrive. And it arrived, and I opened it, and we'd co-won the award. And the other people who had won the award were Adult Entertainment Capital. So I decided I did not want to co-brand with them. But I was very pleased that the name had that resonance for people. And it really has, through the years, captured something of people's imagination. Because in the development space, in international development and poverty relief and so on, the idea of leapfrogging from one stage of development to another, going from a sclerotic landline grid in a country to mobile with 5G and mobile money is a very exciting one, because you don't have to take decades and decades and decades to enable these countries and these industries to rise. So that's one idea. Another idea is that when I looked at what sells, it turns out all of us walk into wine stores, almost all of us, and have no idea of the difference between the different wine bottles. If there is an animal on the bottle, we're 30% more likely to buy it just by the positive association.
Really?
So I was really excited. I like the idea of an animal. And then finally, I looked around and I saw some of these names. And, what are in the names are like rock and these kind of very solid, stodgy things. And I thought, no, I want something that has a level of dynamism, a level of sense that this is the future, this is going far. And so LeapFrog captured all of that. And there was also a wonderful Zen proverb, finally, that said, leap and the net will appear.
Yes.
And so much of being an entrepreneur is about deciding leap and the net will appear, or I will make it appear. And that resonated for me too. So all those things came together in the founding of LeapFrog and in the name.
And it's so interesting. And I love that Zen phrase, leap and the net will appear, or I'll make it appear. Because as an entrepreneur, you can't always see that it's not always a defined path. A lot of it, they talk about you're building the plane whilst flying it. And I'm sure, again, when you were starting out, who were the believers? Who were the people that that supported you? And the kind of the second part to that question is there are going to be people who say you're reckless. This is never going to work. Like you're crazy. And so what did you when you get the the naysayers? What did you do with those voices?
I would say when I started out and I said to people, I'm going to enable 25 million low-income people to get financial services and change their lives. And I'm going to raise $100 million to start to put this thing with profit and purpose together. Pretty much my mother and my wife and my sister believe, but not many others.
Okay.
And I was really fortunate that President Clinton and his team, I met a relatively junior person at the Clinton Global Initiative, and I talked my way up until they could see that this was a truth that was worth exposing in the world. And they put me into the plenary of the Clinton Global Initiative, and I stood up, and President Clinton said that this was going to be a fantastic big thing in the world. Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, was in the audience, was already talking with him, his team, and he tweeted it out, and very soon people started paying attention to this. I would say that it was still a ratio of probably 99-1, and I'm always I always make the joke half in jest and half in truth that I'm glad that dating prepared me for this level of rejection that I had to face in the early days. But Gandhi once said, if you're the bearer of a truth, you can bring down empires. And I think there was something in my story and in the LeapFrog story that was a truth that needed to be heard, and that won round incredible entrepreneurs and early believers, and eventually the development finance institutions, and then later insurers and private equity investors came to believe and put in the first $42 million. And today, of course, we have billions under management, and we have a wide array of institutional investors, over 100 different sophisticated investors. But I'm always so grateful to the first angels and the first one from this institution and the first one from that institution who really believed this crazy guy who had this idea of profit with purpose in his head, and that everybody thought, well, that sounds like a contradiction and utterly impossible.
But when I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and I often think they are called crazy, but it's because they can see a future others yet can't. Yep. And they can visualize it, and to them it's so they can touch it, and it's getting people on that journey. And when you said about it was like the 99-1, but I think if the one is you've got the founder of eBay, President Clinton, visibility, it's having those key people who believe and who can help you get your message out there. And what an extraordinary journey extraordinary. I'm going to underscore and highlight that word extraordinary, because it really is an extraordinary journey, and you're so likable, and you can see the passion and enthusiasm that just comes out of you. And you said about that early ambition, what you hope to raise, the amount of people that you wanted to, you were going to, support on low income people. And I'm wondering, as you say that, like, how much confidence did you have in that early, that early ambition? Did you see the scale of what it was going to become?
I had a sense it could be big, but often I think people look at a founder and they think that what is created was, born from their head and they knew it all from the beginning. My real lesson on that is your idea, your fundamental idea as a founder or as a CEO or both, is a magnet for extraordinary people, for opportunity, for capital. And all of those things will lead to something so far beyond your initial imagination that you can't possibly know it and what shape it will take at the start. And people love to pretend that they look back and they knew exactly what was going to be created. I never believe that. I think it evolves, and hopefully you listen enough and you learn enough from the people around you that it evolves in ways you couldn't have known and couldn't have expected. I started LeapFrog when I was 32. uh, uh, I certainly had a ton of growing to do, and I hope that I changed and my vision changed through the years, and that my vision now is different at a scale that is, you know, 25 times our original vision, and now looking 25 times ahead. You multiply those by each other, it should be 625 times bigger. And I hope I would not have exactly the same view at this point as I had then. So I really believe in having very specific plans, but also believing that the people will make history, that small group you and I spoke about. And if you look at LeapFrog, it's less than 100 people who are backing 40-something companies and their management teams, who together are employing 320,000 people, who together are serving 569 million people. And if you think about the leverage in that, they're really, what you want to do is have great people on your team who can shape what you do and who can come up with things you wouldn't otherwise do, because the way those less than 100 people show up and what they create ripples out to so many millions of people that you really need to bring the best of each person in the team to bear and not think that one person has all the answers. And it's partly why I built a partnership. And from the beginning, by the way, I was the youngest partner, with people who had many more years of experience than me often, because I think that the partnership model often allows for that diversity of perspectives and those divergent capabilities that go beyond what any one person can do in terms of creativity, understanding, execution, and the ripples that then go out into the world.
You've used the word ripple, and I always like the ROI. I think ripple of impact. What is the ripple of impact that idea, that conversation is creating? Because it's an echo. And I think when we start to, really, all of us, start to think, everything has a ripple, it brings more consciousness to the choices that we're making. And you said that no one person has all the answers. And I think as leaders and entrepreneurs, it's to recognize when you've got that strong bench of talent, you're not expected to have all the answers, but it's having the team around you and bringing out the best in each other. And you've attracted over the years such an extraordinary bench, a bench of talent. And I'm wondering, if you were to put yourself into their shoes, what do you think has drawn them to working with you, to being, a partner at LeapFrog?
Well, I think the idea of practicing their excellence, which is investing or operations across a very distributed firm, while having a higher purpose. There's that line, why have a job when you can have a purpose? Has really resonated for everybody. These are people who were brilliant in their industries and often at the heights of their industries and lionized in their industries. Some of the folks who came across. And then there are folks who joined us much earlier in their careers, but were the highest performers in their universities or in their early jobs, and who felt there must be a meaning beyond this, and yet I want to do this thing brilliantly. So that is something in terms of the excellent investors with an impact soul value that we have that I think unites us all. I also think we're just really inspired by the companies. If you look at the companies we invest behind, we for instance, our healthcare team invested in a company called Good Life. It was a small chain of pharmacies in Kenya and turned it into the largest retail healthcare provider in the whole of East Africa. And that is a company that went from a situation where anyone walking into a typical pharmacy has a 30% chance of getting the wrong medication. It's either fake or misprescribed or a placebo, through to a company that looks like Boots when you walk in, has 150 stores, serves millions of people, and has path labs, has nutritionists, has all these forms of advice and support. And where our partner was actually a subsidiary of Toyota, and they just acquired the whole company from us, by the way. So it was a brilliant exit for LeapFrog's investors. But if you're a healthcare person or you're an investor in Africa, being able to be part of that is incredibly special. If you're in India, we were speaking about credit earlier. If you're in India, we got behind Northern Arc, this relatively small group. We were the first institutional investor that said, you know what, let's not build one microfinance institution. Let's support all the microfinance institutions that are serving low-income women across the society. Let's open the gates of the capital markets to them. Let's structure it so that they can get more capital that they can put into funds and other vehicles and deploy into these microcredit institutions and serve many women. Well, today, that institution has IPO'd and serves 100 million women with credit. I almost said low income, but a lot of them are not low income anymore because they've used the credit to lift their families out of poverty. Now, if you're investing in Asia or you're investing in financial services, you want to be part of that. And so I think the actual activity that we do and the immediacy of it, that it's not grand theoretical box ticking. It genuinely is changing lives in a deep way at an unprecedented scale in diverse ways. That profoundly resonates for people because once they've seen that, once they're doing that, how can they go anywhere else?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, listening to you there, when you talk about the scale of the impact and the immediacy of the impact as well, and and the scale at which the companies are changing lives. How? I suppose I'm wondering. Do you take a moment to kind of breathe it all in to be like, wow, I know you want to change the world. You're so mission led, and I'm wondering if you take a moment to pause to really feel the feels of what you're creating.
Georgie, honestly, this has been a journey for me. I used to just get to the one milestone and then be off to the next one. And I, at a certain point, got feedback that the team needed to stop and celebrate a little bit. They couldn't live in the 6-month to 20-year horizon all the time. And I think I am much better at it. I'm just coming out of our global leadership offsite in Vietnam, where we did do a lot of celebrating in various ways of the achievements of the firm, a record fund that we raised last year for investing in financial services and healthcare, a successful launch of our climate strategy, as you mentioned, reaching over 500 million people with essential services, and of that, 413 million are low income. So that's 10% of the world's low-income population now reached by LeapFrog companies, which is a massive achievement we were really celebrating. And fundamentally, above all, building something that is so far beyond me, where there are incredible people in every position. I looked around that table and there wasn't a leader. I wanted to find someone else to do their job. I felt these are extraordinary humans and extraordinary professionals, and they can carry this incredible mission. And I really did take time to say to the team, look at what we have built here. Yes, we want to reach 1 billion people, low-income people, by the end of this decade with essential services. Yes, we want to grow into the many multi-billions and show a different way of doing capitalism. Yes, we want to crowd in many of the world's largest institutions. We've started a number, but many, many more of them into impact investing. Yes, we're going to lead this asset class or this strategy into the tens of trillions. But for now, you do need to stop and say, wow, this is so much further than we imagined before. I so appreciate the people around me. I so appreciate the midnight oil that was burnt, the time away from families when we're on the road, because this is a distributed firm, the moments of resilience when COVID struck, or when we had very difficult moments in the markets with currency ructions or challenges that companies faced. This was not a smooth journey, and I would never want to pretend that it is. And I think part of what we really celebrate above all is our resilience, because if you really are resilient, so that if you start losing money for investors, you go and you get that money back. And if the cycle turns against you, you then accelerate into the cycle and get heroic outcomes with that action. If you really take that attitude, you can get through so much that inevitably comes your way when you're building a business across dozens of countries.
Oh, there's so much to unpack there, but one of the pieces that you meant, I think this is really important for all, not just leaders actually, celebrate the milestones. And you and I talked about, you can get to the summit and, you reach the summit and you're like, next big summit, but actually take a moment to take in the view, because there's a journey of setbacks, challenges, things may not have gone your way through external, variables. We talk about, COVID, so adapting and so it is, don't miss those moments, because they're so motivational, and there's so much that goes into those, milestones.
And sharing credit for those milestones. The thing I find frankly bizarre and confusing is when founders or leaders try and take all the credit for the thing created. And it's such an ephemeral thing that falls away almost immediately, versus if you share credit, which is actually much more accurate, those people feel so endorsed, supported, enlarged, enabled by the sharing of that credit and by the recognition of what they have done. And they're able to go then and do so much more. Yeah. So it's a much better medium to long-term strategy, as well as the right thing to do. I love that quote by Socrates, who said it's rational to be moral. I really am struck by the need to not only stop and celebrate, but make sure that the credit is given where credit is due, and you share it as widely as possible. And yes, occasionally people will take credit for something you came up with. That's fantastic. That means they've internalized so much what you said or what you did previously that they've lost track of the fact that it was yours, not theirs. Brilliant. Your internal marketing or external marketing has really worked. So embrace it and be happy with it.
And to your point, give people credit because it has a multiplier impact. I mean, it yields high returns there. And you touched on the word resiliency, and you strike me in our conversation someone that is energy rich, and equally it's such, emotions are contagious. There's a contagion, and you have such incredible energy. And agency sits with each of us to manage our own energy, because our cars, our fuel tanks, we have an energy bank account. And so as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, traveling a lot, there are a lot of debits coming out of your energy bank account. How do you make sure the credits go in so you so you kind of stay fit for purpose? And by that I mean so you can function and be incredible at what you do.
Well, energy has to be renewable, not just extractive.
This is true, actually. This is true.
And so I think you have to think about what fundamentally renews you. And different people are different, right? There are a lot of introverts for whom time with themselves and time to think and time to look out the window and time to listen to music is the thing that does it. And I admire and appreciate that. For me, it's the time with people who I really love and care about. And if I don't get date night with my wife in a week, or a walk with a friend on the weekend, and of course my weekly nap on the weekend, I am not a renewed resource. So I think you really have to learn what are those things that energize you. I also think recognizing the things that suck your energy out is so important. And we're also driven by, I ought to do, I ought to do X, Y, or Z, that we end up undertaking activities that remove a huge amount of our energy. So, for example, if you are an intuitive person who likes people, doing a ton of process and documentation and so on is utterly exhausting. An hour of that takes the same energy as 8 hours of networking, which just makes you walk out excited and wanting to have dinner with some of the people you just met. Similarly, if you're a person who really likes systematically cranking through that to-do list and getting the process along and carrying everybody with you, and you're asked to go and be in a random networking function where you just chat to people and you can't see where this is going right now, that's going to exhaust you. And so you shouldn't do that. So really understanding what works for you in your daily activity is important. So with my co-founder, Gary, we have very different styles and very different things that energize us. And we're very careful to discuss what gives him energy and what he should be carrying and what gives me energy and what I should be carrying. And we actually found that the other was able to carry it so much better and do it so much better if we align not around where things ought to sit or what we each ought to do, because a CEO does this and a COO does that, and a person in Sydney should do this and a person in Johannesburg should do that. You know, these sort of general oughts, but instead aligned around who we were as human beings. That just worked hugely better. So that after 18 years, I can't recommend the starting from who you are an energy point higher for designing the organization. My simple line around this is, don't draw the organizational boxes and then shove people into them. Hire great people and draw the organizational diagram around them.
I love that. And you said there about, it's about knowing our renewable fuel. And I've always believed that all good leadership starts with self-leadership. And self-leadership is about awareness, understanding ourselves from the inside out. And you said there, what fuels you, having a nap on a Saturday might be very different to what fuels me. And when we know what our fuel is, it's prioritizing that and protecting it or putting that in our diaries, because your mission needs you to be energized. It needs you to have vitality and also longevity.
Absolutely. I mean, my parents met in psychology class. And so I'm definitely a product of that experiment of trying to know yourself and empathize with others in terms of where they are coming from and understand the psychodynamics between you. And I think there are so many layers that the world places on top of us, where we view people through their position in the company, their age, their gender, their race, their whatever the implicit categorizations that we've been taught to make, when instead what we should be doing is trying to work out who is this person in their individuality and what is it that moves them. And I've tried really hard. It's an ongoing journey. We all make mistakes. We all have various biases and blind spots. But I've tried really hard to truly see the people who I'm working with and truly align their activity around the things that make them a renewable resource and allow them to really leap to heights that they never expected, and that therefore allow the company to leap to heights that no one ever anticipated.
Yeah, and you use the word eyes there, and I think it's have eyes that see and ears that hear, because often we're in that constant go, 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 but actually if you take a pause and are really conscious, you can see, well, look, what motivates your COO might be very different to another partner. So it's really, really tuning into them. And I want to just underscore a few of the stats that you shared earlier, because I think the numbers are so extraordinary. But your portfolio companies have reached over 500 million people, 559 million people last year. And that's including more than 403 million low-income emerging consumers living on less than $11.20 a day. And at the same time, your portfolio companies have generated over 7.1 billion in revenues, with an average compound annual growth rate of 22% and a 9% rise in profit margins across active companies in funds 3 and 4. extraordinary. And I'm like, what's next? So we talked about celebrating the milestones. What does success look like for you? And I don't know what the time frame is, because you said earlier on, your team say we don't always be in the 6 months to 20 years. So what does success look like for you?
Well, first, we want to reach 1 billion low-income people with essential services by the end of this decade. So yes, we have reached almost half that number, but there's a long way to go. We also want to offer them a more diverse array of essential services and goods through our companies. So LeapFrog companies offer payments and remittances and insurance and savings and credit and so forth in the financial services space. They offer all sorts of inpatient and outpatient healthcare of various kinds. But increasingly, we're doing work in the climate space. And we've launched a climate strategy that I announced at Windsor with the King and the US President that now focuses on areas like clean energy for homes, clean transport, for instance, with 2- and 3-wheel bikes and auto rickshaws that exist in their tens of millions, in areas like food and agriculture and in the built environment. And we see this climate piece as incredibly important going forward. I think it's important to say that the whole dialogue on climate in the world is focused on only 2 of 3 legs of the stool. And this entire world, the stool, will fall over unless we get that 3rd leg right. So the first leg you hear about in climate is decarbonizing the wealthy countries. And of course, that's incredibly important. They can't just have dirty fuels and dirty ways of operating. Then you hear about green infrastructure in the global north and the global south. Yes, you need cleaner infrastructure that is, heavy buildings, trains, these sorts of things. And they've got to be built and operated. And that's really important, that those giant things don't end up spewing out gases and other things that destroy the environment. But what isn't talked about enough, the 3rd leg, is emerging consumers and producers. So over half the world currently has a small carbon footprint. They don't have that much wealth. They're not flying on planes. They may be driving a 2-wheel vehicle, not a truck, etc., etc. So those people are now getting wealthier and wealthier in our markets. And if they end up having the carbon footprint that you and I have, we are going to blow the world's carbon budget so profoundly that it doesn't matter what happens in the rich countries, because it's more than half of humanity growing manifold times in terms of their carbon footprint. We've actually done a study with CGAP, part of the World Bank Group, and with other major institutions like Temasek, that shows that even if the entire rich world hits all its Paris targets for carbon reduction, and if our developing markets keep going at the pace they're going, we will hit 2.8 degrees warming, which is far beyond what the world can tolerate and will result in massive destruction, heat, drought, waves, everything you can imagine being rained down on all of us and our children and grandchildren. So it's incredibly important we start a global dialogue around how you get green technologies rather than dirty technologies into the hands of 4 billion emerging consumers and producers. And that opportunity is enormous. We back, for instance, in India, Battery Smart, which is the largest battery swapping business in the country. So instead of people lining up with their auto rickshaws outside a gas station, I've literally stood there opposite the gas station, seeing them line up for an hour to put in fuel at a gas station that has a giant rent because it takes up so much space. Our battery swapping stations, which are about 50th of the size of a gas station, sit there. The riders come in on their bikes or their auto rickshaw, stop, jump off, pull out their battery, drop it down, scan another battery with their mobile phone, lift it up, put it into the vehicle, put the lid down, and keep going within less than 2 minutes. And what does that cost? Well, the bike is 30 to 40% cheaper because it doesn't have an engine and it doesn't have a
Yeah.
battery in it. And it's 30% cheaper to fill up because you've got the battery rather than the fuel. And it saves people an hour to 2 hours of queuing a day of productive time. This is what we call the green discount. It's actually cheaper to have a green technology. And it's empowering for those people, and it's better for them as producers, as delivery drivers, or whatever it is that they do, or just getting to work for longer. So we think that this climate space is incredibly exciting because you have an opportunity to back companies that bring half of humanity, new technologically advanced tools that you aren't saying you ought to have this. You're saying this is better, it's cheaper, and it's cleaner. Adopt all of this. And things that are all of those things will win, and millions and millions of people will adopt them. And we see this all over the world now as areas that we can unfold investment and put enormous amount of capital to work and do very well for our investors with, and where many, many unicorns will be minted in places like India and Nigeria and Indonesia and Vietnam. People, of course, think about the Chinese consumer, 1 billion people who rose, an economy that grew 50x, but that is happening now in all those other countries. And hopefully all those other countries can leapfrog in terms of the green space, in terms of clean energy, clean transport, clean food and ag, clean buildings, in a way that those consumers, even in China, couldn't at the time. So we really see these as all important areas: financial services, healthcare, and climate, because at the root of everything, if you have wealth, health, and energy, you can do almost everything else. You can pay for your daughter's school fees. You can get to college. You can do all these other areas, because those are the three things at the root of everything. So we will continue to cascade out to hundreds of millions of people through our companies, those three things: wealth, health, and energy.
I love that. Thank you so much, Andy, for spending time with me today. And to circle back at the beginning, you talked about, this, I think my word's revolution, but this mission that you spoke to. And it's so profound, it's so purposeful, and you ignite people. There's the way you speak and how you share your mission, it moves people. And I imagine everyone you come into contact with, there's a bias for action because they see what you see. Your vision is compelling. As I said, it's so inspiring. And I'll be one of your disciples, because I want to help educate people as well. And I've learned so much from you today. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I know there's so much more, having watched your TEDx talks, and that there is. So if people want to, what would you like the average? When I say the average, I don't mean the average, but if we want to do more to support this mission, what's your ask of people? What could be a valuable call to action?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Georgie. And of course, having read what you've written and seen your speaking very powerfully, I'm very touched by that, because I know you know where that comes from and that it's hard to do that. And so I really appreciate that. I think the first thing is, our website is a really rich resource, leapfroginvest.com. We've been working very hard to build not only an exemplary firm, but an industry. And it's a good way into the industry. You can look at the companies, you can see the customer experiences, you can learn about the investors. It's really an exciting, rich world to go to. We also have a set of impact and investment results we come up with each year that is filled with video content and other experiences where you can really get familiar with these things. And if you just put LeapFrog Impact Investment Results into your browser, you can find that. I'm also a big poster on LinkedIn 2 or 3 times a week, where I try and capture what I'm experiencing in the different countries and meeting different people and different company leaders. So hopefully people can follow that. In terms of action that you can take in your own life, I really believe throwing away a very outmoded notion that there's a conflict between doing good and doing business or investing is very important. We've all were brought up in a world where we were told they're for profit and non-profit. And of course, those are complete artifices. And you need to kind of look for ways to find money with meaning, or profit with purpose, and find places where those come together, because sometimes those synergistic places are the most powerful for really changing the world and for moving you. So I think just being really attentive to it and not buying into the way the world has tried to organize things is really important in your own life, whether it's by starting or supporting a social enterprise or seeing that a business can take new leaps into areas that are more impactful and can be oriented that way and can motivate its staff more that way, or whether it's saying, wow, the way I'll invest will be more attentive to the fact that there are big opportunities for profit out there in places that are untrammeled, places that people haven't looked, but there are companies like LeapFrog's companies that are doing that. That is something that I think we should all be more attentive to. And I think telling the story is also important, right? There are very well-resourced institutions in this world who are not interested in the revolution and the transformation, right? Who are spruiking a very old form of capitalism that is not adaptive for economies or societies. And so I think really telling the story of LeapFrog, of impact investing, of what any one of us does in Profit with Purpose is important, because stories often break through so much more than hortatory language and noble sentiments. And so when we talk about these are the companies, this is how this company lit up 100 million homes in Africa, and so girls are not studying at night by candlelight and unable to avoid walking through the streets in dangerous times because the streets are lit up. When you talk about those stories, it resonates for people much more than saying, oh, we need to get energy to Africa or something like that. So I really encourage people to tell these stories if you have them. You can find them in your own life. You can find them on LeapFrog's website or in the stories of impact investors, and to get out there. And that narrative will progressively and change the world when it comes from so many different directions and it's carried as a truth by more and more people.
Thank you, Andy. I'm truly humbled by this conversation. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Georgia. It's been such a pleasure.